Hello and welcome to the 82nd episode of the Accountant Success Secrets podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Philippa Haynes, a brand expert for accountants and bookkeepers, supporting you to stand out.
And I'm Mark Lee of Bookmark Lee. I run the Sole Practice Club and I'm a mentor, speaker and debunker. Since 2023, we've been interviewing inspiring accountants and bookkeepers who are doing great things, have years of experience, and whose stories can inspire and encourage other accountants and bookkeepers.
Yeah, what's all this bit, Mark? Are you feeling up for it today? We both recognise that every accountant and bookkeeper is unique and distinct. They've got different backgrounds, experiences, reasons for starting and building their practices.
Yep. You always do it. I thought I'd copy you.
No, it was the Mark Lee. Yeah.
So we've done 66 of these interviews so far. We've asked each of our interviewees to share their stories, including the highs, the lows, and what they've learned along the way. We look to explore the things that make them different in terms of their background, their successes, their failures, and their focus. And our aim each week is to provide some fundamental insights for you, our loyal listener.
Yeah, so, oh gosh, you've got me started now. Beyond that, we schedule regular reflections episodes like this one. So today, in just 30 minutes or so, we're reflecting on 4 of our most recent interviews, and we'll both share and discuss something from each interview that resonated with us personally and also professionally, I guess, because we have very different areas of expertise, which is what really adds the value. Well, at least we hope so.
Yeah. But just before we do that, a word about the sponsor of our podcast, Pinnacle Global Group, the trusted outsourcing partner to over 150 accounting and bookkeeping firms across the UK and Ireland. Led by London-based chartered accountant Mayak Pandya, and with offices in London and Mumbai and a team of over 300 professionals, Pinnacle provides both compliance resourcing from accountants, bookkeepers and payroll admins to tax and audit associates, and value-added support, including management accounts, virtual financial controllers, financial analysts, and more. They're GDPR compliant, ISO certified, covered by PII, and offer flexible models, full-time, part-time, or pay-as-you-go. You can even start with a trial period and join a sponsored trip to Mumbai to meet the team in person. Find out more at www.pinnacleoss.co.uk or click the link wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Also supporting the podcast is the Tax Advice Network. Their website enables accountants to choose specific specialist tax advisors for general tax support or for help across any of over 100 areas of tax. It's free to use. You just pay the tax advisor you choose after agreeing terms with them. So go take a look at their website called findataxadvisor.online, where you can also register to get their weekly tax tips, which are written especially for general practitioner accountants.
And finally, before we start our reflections, you can also now subscribe to our podcast on the Patreon platform. This is where you can share your love and support for Accountants Success Secrets and also subscribe for exclusive Patreon-only extras.
Yeah, to do this, you'll need to download the Patreon app. But once you've subscribed, you will get the extra episodes via your normal podcast platform. You'll find details of what to do in our normal podcast notes and on the Accountant Success Secrets pages on Facebook and on LinkedIn.
Yeah. For our first reflection today, we're going to go back to episode 78, when we spoke with Richard Wilson Artus, who runs MWA Accounting in Manchester City Centre. And I loved the way that Richard admitted having started his practice after being made redundant, thinking, how hard can it be? Not a practice. And like so many people, he had some existing clients at his old firm who liked him, but it transpired they didn't want to take the risk of going to him when he started his new accounting firm. And you'll have to listen to the podcast proper to find out how he managed to start his practice regardless and took what I think was a very sensible approach to doing this. And one thing he said here, and then I'll pass over to you, Philippa. But one thing he said here that reminded me of a point I frequently make to accountants. He said he's tried approaching local businesses and effectively saying, hey, do you need an accountant? Obviously not in those words. And the related point that I often make is the need to distinguish new businesses that have yet to appoint an accountant from businesses that probably already have one, and being clear as to why they might want to choose to move to you rather than stay with the incumbent. And the message you deliver, or that you, when you're offering your services to someone who's never had an accountant, is different to the message that you offer to somebody who's already got an accountant that you're looking to replace.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And what I really liked about our chat with Richard was he seemed to have a lot of truth bombs, as I'd like to call it. One of them talking about, you know, the challenge of finding clients initially, but I think equally he talked about kind of the COVID situation, and they'd started to niche in hospitality. And of course, as soon as COVID struck, which seems like a long time ago now, but you know, he said that he lost pretty much 85% of his clients immediately. And so, you know, that is not for the faint-hearted. But he was very open and honest about that, and you know, sort of talked about how they got through that, and of course they did. But yes, and now he sort of talks about how niching is important, but you also have to have some backup plans. And this is where he also talked about the type of clients that he has, not just the advisory, which actually he's better at doing, and he's sort of taken a step back from the day to day and done more of that kind of consultancy work. But it's really important to have those bread and butter clients as well, to have that foundation. And whilst he doesn't do that and he gives those to his team, you know, there is a number, or rather there are a number of clients and a number of work coming in that enables him to have that safety net whatever happens. And I think that was a really good, you know, again, some difficult things going on. He was happy to talk about it, but also talk about being pragmatic and finding a way of avoiding that in the future.
That's a really good point. And related to that was Richard referencing the ubiquitous
Yeah.
situation of needing to increase his fees more often, particularly for legacy clients, sort of the old initial compliance cases, where the gap between fee reviews was perhaps longer than he'd have liked. And again, it's a conversation I have with a number of mentoring clients, and I frequently hear from accountants who see the value of having regular fee reviews or even automatic annual increases, but they can't always manage it, maybe needs some guidance, help, support or whatever. Richard made the point that he continued increasing the fees for his legacy clients until they became unwilling to pay them. And I do know many accountants who just feel such loyalty to their earlier clients, what I call legacy clients, that aren't paying the fees that they're charging new clients. And despite, and it's quite a natural loyalty, and if you've got the capacity to keep them and you want to do so, that's fine. But Richard mentioned that he'd identified that some of his legacy clients he didn't want anymore, even if they were willing to pay higher fees. And that's quite a crucial insight too. It's your practice. You can decide who you want to act for. You don't have to continue acting for low-paying clients, even though they were the ones that helped you start your practice.
I think it's a really important point, because we, you know, the phrase familiarity breeds contempt. And if you don't review fees over the years, then both parties become quite complacent and don't really appreciate the other. Certainly from a client perspective, they just assume that it's going to be the same. And almost if you increase fees in a more regular sort of way, established way, then it is a positive kind of decision to continue with that accountant because they believe they're bringing that value and they want to stay with them. But I think, if you just carry on and you never have that conversation, you know what it's like with friendships. Sometimes they sort of ebb and flow, and you take advantage even though you don't expect to or don't want to, but you just take them for granted, I think. So I think it's really important,
it
that
is.
message.
And I also frequently hear from accountants who took a big gulp and raised the idea of increasing fees with clients, only to find that those clients went, "Oh, thank goodness. I thought you were getting ready to sack me because I know I'm not paying a commercial fee." They were only too pleased to be asked to pay higher fees. And we shouldn't always assume that clients will leave if we put fees up. Anyway,
Exactly. We should move on. Yeah.
Episode. Go on, you do it.
Oh, okay. So episode 79, we spoke with Stuart Harris, the friendly accountant based in Woodside Park in North London. And I think it's very easy to call yourself something like the friendly accountant or the not boring accountant, but and it to be meaningless. But in Stuart's case, he just generally is a really nice, chatty, friendly guy who I think understands the value of relationships, is a big networker, and doesn't necessarily approach networking talking about accountancy, but just becomes friends and becomes established. And that really kind of was the big thing that that I noticed, that he's just a really good guy, but is also very happy to share knowledge with his with his peers. He's friendly on many different levels. He just thinks that they're all in it together. It's not just with his clients, but it's with his peers and other businesses too. So that was lovely. But that's not to say that he isn't switched on as well, and that he isn't tech focused. And I think you're going to pull up the same point around this lovely little electronic reminder that he.
Well, I will come to that.
Go on then.
First of all, I congratulated him on his opening comment, which alludes to what you just said, that he knows he's running a small business himself, and references that when he's talking to his business clients, which I'm sure makes him more relatable than if he was just talking about accounting and finance issues with people when he's not working. And we return to that on the Patreon's Only Extra interview, the whole networking thing. But on the main podcast, Stuart did mention that it was networking that had helped him to start his practice, because he knew he had to get out and meet people. And he recognises that social media is good fun, but he sounded as if he'd agree with my sentiment that just posting content on social media is rarely going to generate clients for most accountants. There was something I wanted to pick him up on, a very common phrase. It just gets my hackles rising. He said he's a bit of a magpie, and if he sees a good idea, he said, "I nick it." Now, we all know what that means, but I still encourage accountants to avoid use of that phrase, because either subconsciously or subliminally, it implies that you're not honest. And I suggest it's much better to say what is probably closer to the truth anyway. I've been inspired by something, than to say you've nicked the idea. I just think it's important from a professional perspective. I know I'm in a minority on this, but I still share the observation. You're right. He shared a brilliant solution to the idea of reminding clients of forthcoming tax payments without having to do any extra work. Do take a listen to the podcast to find out what it was if you missed it.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, the other thing to pick up on is Stuart's clearly been fortunate in that he has a group of local accountants that he meets with regularly, and they pick each other's brains, and he finds this very helpful. And that doesn't surprise me, because it's one of the reasons why accountants, mostly who don't have that facility, join my sole practice club, where they pick my brain as well as the brains of fellow members. And Stuart also said having another opinion is important too. And again, obviously, I agree with that. Those accountants who have a spouse or a partner have somebody that they can potentially bounce things around with. Those without that facility, well, I suppose that's another one of the reasons why accountants work with me on a one-to-one basis, as a mentor, a sounding board, maybe even almost as a non-exec for their practice. Everyone's different, but everyone benefits from having somebody that they can bounce things around with, whether that's a partner, a spouse, or a mentor, or someone like me.
Yeah, well said. So shall we move on?
Yeah,
we move on to
episode 80, we spoke with your erstwhile client, Penny Allard, who runs her Wild Bookkeeping practice. And inevitably, we heard in detail her rebranding story and the support that you gave in that regard. I wanted to pick up on one element that reminded me of an experience I had with branding people over 20 years ago. And I don't think I've shared this story with you before. I might have done.
I'm beginning to worry already what you're going to say, but
Penny mentioned, and correct me if I got this wrong, but she mentioned the original reason that she considered rebranding wasn't because was because she wasn't sure whether to use her maiden name or her ex-husband's surname, and then realizing it didn't matter. And that reminded me when I was leading the tax support team at the tax consultancy WJB Chiltern. And the initials referenced the three founders of the original tax consultancy, Williams, Jeffrey, Barber. And I remember we had the branding people in, and after doing some initial research, they told us that Chiltern was quite a strong name, but the WJB bit at the beginning made it instantly immemorable. People unfamiliar with the original names couldn't remember the three initials, and even if they did, they didn't know what order they should be in. So we were advised to drop the initials, which we did. Existing clients didn't care what we were called, as I knew would be the case. And I'm absolutely sure that new clients found it easier to reference and remember us because of the clarity of our name going forwards. And I think there's a lesson there. I appreciate your views on this, Philippa, but I think there's a lesson there for some accountants, particularly those who have a preference for their initials in their practice name. What do you think?
Yeah, there's definitely an argument, and I would agree with this, that just removing those initials, especially if you've got a strong name, like what did you say, Chiltern?
Yeah.
That makes, that's a really good point and a really strong name. And you're right, most people don't really bother about the initials, and certainly if you're an existing client, they probably wouldn't notice anyway. The other part of the mix really is about the modern world and modern day accountancy, and whether those initials sort of hark back to an older day, previous time, where accountants were seen as quite sort of old-fashioned and sort of tight-lipped. And I think these days, certainly for those future-focused accountants who want to be more kind of involved with a relationship, they want to break down barriers and not have that old-fashioned name and that kind of calling people by their Mr. whatever or Mrs. I think it certainly does conjure up a much more old-fashioned type of organization. And okay, if you want to be that practice like that, and everything around you says that, then maybe that works for you. But you do need to think about the image that you want to portray going forward. For sure.
I think that's absolutely right. I love the way Penny said that working with you gave her permission to be herself and made networking that much easier.
Yeah.
And I think back and realise that one of many mistakes I made years ago was not doing magic at networking events. In other words, I chose not to do magic at networking events, despite doing magic socially, anywhere and everywhere, pub or whatever. Magic was a key part of who I was then, and to an extent still is now. But even more so when I was younger. But I kept it hidden in a professional context largely because I was always concerned it might adversely impact my professional credibility. Looking back with everything I know now, and I don't just mean what I've learned in my life, but what I understand about being your authentic self. And this, again, very much came out of the conversations that you'd had with Penny, I realized that doing magic at networking events would have revealed another side of me, a genuine part of me, especially as I was always focused on entertaining people rather than trying to fool them with my magic.
Yeah, it's things, whether it's magic or whatever it is, like Penny and water and swimming. It's what gets you noticed, but also makes you memorable.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying do that in an inauthentic way, but if you do have a passion or you do have another side to you, it's not going to muddy the waters necessarily. It's all about incorporating that into your story. And certainly Penny's done that
oh yeah,
because
very
it
much so.
influences. Yes, she's great on social media and she turns everything into the script. It goes back to the water or the swimming or the sustainability. So there is a point there. It's not just some bit of icing on the cake. It is the main kind of theme of all of the work that she does. And what it does is it pulls in people who feel the same.
Yeah,
So the clients that she's talking with, for instance, she got somebody who was very interested in that particular area and was into sailing and all of that, and instantly they clicked, and there was that point of kind of personal connection, that relationship part that's really important. And now Penny has gone on to work with the water board near her. They've also developed some kind of I can't remember what it is. She needs to correct me really, but they've pulled together this association, and I know that she does the bookkeeping for them now. But she is really strongly involved in that part, and rather than taking it away from her other business, she just incorporates it, and that's where the magic happens. And that's coming back to you, Mark, where you've used parts of your magic in your presentations, and it's a lovely way for people just to visually remember you.
I think, yeah, I've been doing that for a while now, but when I was in practice, the journalists knew about the magic because that was when I was being press spokesman or whatever. They would always come back to me by reference to that, and most of my colleagues did as well, but most of my clients didn't. Different stories I could share on other occasions there. Thank you for that. And of course, one other thing, Penny stressed that being a sole practitioner doesn't mean that you can't have any staff. And certainly that's true of many of the sole practitioners that I work with. Some have staff, some don't, and that's fine.
Yes.
Anyway, finally,
Absolutely.
today we should reflect on our most recent interviewee from episode 81 last week, when we had perhaps our most revealing and touching interview to date with Nicky Gentle, who runs the Thrive Bookkeeping in Devizes, Wiltshire.
Yeah, we had a really good 30 minutes with Nicky, didn't we? And again, people talk about accountants or bookkeepers with heart, and sometimes it's probably fairly meaningless. But with Nicky, she is all heart, and she wears her heart on her sleeve. She's very open and honest about some of the struggles that she's had, including the sort of physical side of illnesses, and also the mental health side. And so we heard a lot about the years of sort of the rough years, really, but also the years of her finding out about bookkeeping, and how it works for her, and her approach with her clients, and how she does things. And she was warts and all, I
Yeah,
think we'd say.
I,
She
I'm,
provided a
yeah,
really human side.
yeah. It's such an inspiring lady, and I'm sure many listeners, assuming we do have more than one, which I feedback would suggest we do, but I'm sure many listeners would have found her story quite compelling, especially her mantra of wanting to do more than survive. She wants
Yeah.
to thrive, and that, of course, is the name of her practice. And although she's been a bookkeeper for many years, she only set up her own limited company a few years ago, feeling that, I think she said that she felt that would give her more credibility, having previously operated as a sole trader. And I tend to think this is a personal preference issue and can impact bookkeepers and accountants' confidence more than anything else. Frankly, I doubt many clients know or care whether their accountant or bookkeeper operates as a limited company or as a sole trader. Perhaps of more relevance is whether they're registered for VAT if the clients aren't able to recover VAT on their fees. Like many of us, Nicky said that she felt she's totally unemployable. And again, I'm sure many listeners could relate to that. And she shared some excellent advice and insights there.
She did.
In particular, I thought, she'd realised that comparing herself with others is a wasted emotion. She said that in a really compelling way. And although she's aware there's some great guidance out there for bookkeepers who want to be more successful, Nicky said she resists following some of what might be perceived as key influencers because she doesn't want to feel bad because what they recommend seems so unattainable to her. And again, I doubt she's alone in that, without taking anything away from the superb advice which is available out there. Nicky's learned to be kinder to herself and to surround herself with people who can teach her without her feeling it's a struggle to keep up and to get better at what she does. And if I can say so, I think that's one of the reasons why some accountants choose to work with me rather than some of the other mentors and business coaches for accountants out there, because I'm much more interested in supporting and encouraging them to be the best they can, rather than encouraging them to be chasing high growth, high turnover, or high profits if that's not something they feel comfortable doing.
Yeah, I agree. One of the pieces of feedback we get about this podcast a lot is that accountants and bookkeepers don't feel alone when they listen to this, because we show, we give insights, we talk about the highs and lows, and people can really identify with that. And I was really struck when we were talking to Nicky that there would be a lot of bookkeepers and accountants out there who would be listening to her and would be feeling not only relieved, but much more positive about how they're approaching their own practice and their own work, because it's not easy. But she illustrated really well, really compellingly, how it's this horrible word, a journey, rather than an instant destination. And she's still working things out and still having issues, but having more confidence now in herself to be able to to work them through and be open and honest with people. And that is really the end goal, isn't it? To feel confident in yourself, to have the right people in front of you, the right clients who want you for the way that you're doing it. And as you say, there's no comparison with anybody else. And comparing yourself is a fool's game, but it's one of the games that we all play until we have that aha moment and maybe become wiser as a consequence.
That's absolutely right. Nice way to finish, because once again, time's flown. We need to wrap things up. We'll be back to our normal interview format next time, when we'll be meeting Emma Wilder, the founder of Beyond Profit, a family-run accountancy practice recommended to us by our recent interviewee, Steph Beeston Clark.
That's right.
And they have a similar specialisation, I think. And then, of course, we'll be back with another reflection session like this in a few weeks' time.
Yes. So if you are inspired by this podcast and would also like to be interviewed yourself, maybe you've got a story, maybe you've just got some hints and tips, we are always looking for the next kind of availability in January and February. So do get in touch with us. We're fully booked until the end of 2025, which is amazing and brilliant. Yeah. But of course, we want that list for January and February. So do please get in touch.
Yeah. You'll find all of the interviews and episodes we've mentioned on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Patreon, and on Apple Podcasts. If you feel we deserve it, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help us reach an even wider audience. And obviously, please also let us have your feedback and share the love online too. By the way, if you're a listener who just searches online each week for the episode, or you only watch this on the LinkedIn feed, then do please subscribe on one of the podcast channels, or even better, on our Patreon channel, so that we have a better idea of how many regular listeners we have.
Yeah. Just before we finish up then, thanks again to the sponsor of this episode, Pinnacle Global Group, your trusted outsourcing partner. Do check out their website and let their CEO, Mayank, know you heard about Pinnacle Global on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast.
And thanks to the Tax Advice Network, the easiest way for accountants to reach specialist tax advisors. Remember, there's no charge for using the website. Find a taxadvisor.online, where you can also register to try their weekly tax tips, written especially for general practitioner accountants. And Philippa, should we quickly share our contact details in the traditional way? How can listeners find out more about you?
Absolutely. So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, where you'll see that I support accountants and bookkeepers to stand out. And I think listening to the podcast, you'll understand how it's all about their stories, what makes them unique, and then how that can be brought out in their marketing. So if you are interested in working on your story and what makes you unique, then please do get in touch. And Mark, how can listeners find out more about you and your support services for accountants?
Thank you. Well, online, everywhere I'm Bookmark Lee. The website is bookmarklee.co.uk. On LinkedIn, Mark Lee FCA, to distinguish me from over 5,000 other Mark Lees. On LinkedIn, you'll see I work one-to-one with accountants. I have the Sole Practice Club, which is for sole practitioners with or without staff. And I run webinars and a range of other things for accountants who want to feel more confident as regards their plans, challenges, key decisions, or just want somebody to bounce things around with. I'm always happy to have an initial conversation, no obligation, no strings, and no pushy sales techniques. So do please reach out, connect with Philippa and myself on LinkedIn, and follow the podcast pages on LinkedIn and on Facebook.
Okay, that's it. We are done. We're out of here.
Yeah, and we are getting quite good at timing things without it being too obvious to ourselves. Anyway, hopefully our listeners are enjoying it too. Let us know, please. We always welcome feedback, constructive and positive. But many thanks again, Philippa. I think we managed to make that as smooth as we could. But until next time on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast, or anywhere else we might meet online or in real life. Bye-bye for now.
See you soon.